I begin by sending my peace and blessings onto the Holy Prophet and his blessed progeny, and by giving my condolences to all of you and the Imam of our time regarding the passing of Sayyida Zainab. When we look into the life of Sayyida Zainab, salam alayha, we see that there are many tragedies that befall her. There are many calamities that fall. And she goes through so many difficulties. And a question must arise. When so much troubles and so much difficulties fall upon one person, and there's so much tragedy, does that not make one lose their faith in Allah? For we see many times that a lot of people's reasons as to leaving the faith, or leaving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or not believing in Him even, is because they've received or have been on the end of a tragedy, at the end of calamity, whether that be the passing of someone, whether that be losing a job, whether that be any other reason that someone might have some trials in their life. They lose faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But I want to speak tonight regarding the life of Sayyida Zainab salam alayha, and how that can remind us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through these calamities, doesn't cause us to leave Him. Rather, these calamities should be looked at in a different light. Because if you look at the glass half empty, then of course you're going to realize that in a very pessimistic view, this is something bad for you. But if we look at it through a different light, and through the eyes of Sayyida Zainab, we can see that these calamities are not something that when they befall on us, we should feel a sense of hopelessness. But rather, we should get back up and we should be ready to tackle these problems and tackle these situations and try to arise from that ourselves. And not many can say they've been tested the same level of Sayyida Zainab salam alayha. We're going to discuss later on how many trials and tribulations she's been tested. But first, let's look at it through her lens of understanding how these trials work. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, at the beginning I recited, وَأَعْلَمُوا أَنَّمَا أَمْوَالُكُمْ أَوْلَادُكُمْ فِتْنَةً. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, He says, and know and understand that your wealth and your children are a fitna for you. They are for you only a test. And these tests are for you to be able to understand if you will succeed, if you will follow Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or if these cause you to be away from Allah. So remember, أَوْلَادُكُمْ وَأَمْوَالُكُمْ. These two are very important for us to understand, that Allah puts these in place to test you for what you will become. وَأَنَّ اللَّهَ عِنْدَهُ أَجْرٌ عَظِيمٌ. And that which is close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that is a higher reward than anything that you can receive in this world. And in the eyes of a mu'min, in the eyes of the Ahlul Bayt who we try to copy, who we try to emulate, they view this world as something that is so distant from the akhirah. And the akhirah can only be something that we want to attain. If you were here in one of my previous discussions on Wednesday, you would know that the eyes of the Ahlul Bayt are only for the akhirah. And the taste of that is much better than anything that they can see in this world. For when you realize that, only then will you start to strive for the akhirah instead of this world. And Imam Ali alayhi salam, what does he say to this life? He says to this life that I have divorced you 3 times, meaning do not return back to me. Because this divorce is one in which I have completely separated my heart from you. And we are no longer meant to be together. So this is the eyes of the Ahlul Bayt, and in the eye of the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He continues in another verse, He says, أَحَسِبَ النَّاسُ أَن يَتَرَكُّوا أَن يَقُولُوا آمَنَّا وَهُمْ لَا يُفْتَنُونَ. And do people think that once they say آمَنَّا, only if once I say I believe, is this enough? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, do you think you will not be put into a test? Well, it's obvious, of course, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will test us. Because if not, what's the difference between this world and the akhirah? Would they not just be one? But no, we see on one side, we see the akhirah, which is what we are trying to strive for. And what is in this world is a test. وَهُمْ لَا يُفْتَنُونَ. Do you not think that you will be tested? We say, no, of course I understand the test. And the Ahlul Bayt completely understood. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in different verses, Allah always makes sure to tell you, إِنَّ مَعَ الْأُسْرِ يُسْرًا فَإِنَّ مَعَ الْأُسْرِ يُسْرًا. With hardships come ease. With difficulties comes ease. So this usr, this difficulty that you have, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make sure that you're going through ease as well. And we don't want to make light of people's hardships and difficulties. Everyone is struggling in their own path, and everyone is following their own ways, which are very different. But you have to remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not put you on this earth just to leave you without a test. And in the Quran we already read here that our point is for us to understand that this test is necessary for us. It helps us grow as a person. Just like an athlete who is ready to go through the Olympics. He wants to succeed in these Olympics, right? So he practices every day. He comes to the track. He runs. And only through blood, sweat, and tears does he get that gold medal. Any of these people that you see on the TV, when you see they have a gold medal around their necks, do you think it's not as a result of pain? Is it not as a result of suffering every single day to reach that they received it? Of course, that is the level in which once they receive that gold medal, it becomes so much sweeter for them. If they didn't try one single day and they received that gold medal, what do you think would be the value of that? But no, because that athlete worked so hard, and because that athlete put so many hours and so much of their sweat into this, that reward that they receive is so sweet. And that's the philosophy of this world at the end of the day. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes sure that only as a result of these hardships do you realize the benefits that we get. If you have a full stomach, if you have a very comfortable life, of course you're not going to understand what bihisht is or that which is in the akhirah is for. And now a question might arise. We might ask, what are the kind of tests that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will test me with? What are these calamities that might befall me? And we see Allah responds in a verse of the Quran. وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوءِ وَنَقْصٍ مِنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ وَبَشِّرَ الصَّابِرِينَ. We will certainly test you with a touch of fear. First of all, fear. You will be faced with fear in your life. There is no one that can say they've been without fear. With famine, there will be time that there will be ju'. Will there be times where you're going to not have food, where you will be feeling a sense of hunger? With the loss of property, نَقْصٍ مِنَ الْأَمْوَالِ. You might lose property, and many of you might have already. But Allah, He says in the Quran, this is not something that you should be surprised with. Rather, you should be ready to take these tests on in this same manner. And what does He say after that? With life and with crops. And every single life that leaves, and every single passing of a loved one, this is a reminder for us that this is only a temporary world, as I've discussed previously. It is a reminder of death, and it's a reminder that it's my akhirah that I want to work towards, but not this world. Salawat. But it's very beautiful how this verse ends. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you you're going to be tested by this. All 4 or 5 of these. But at the end, what does He say? وَبَشِّرَ الصَّابِرِينَ. And give good news to those who are patient. Those who have come across all of these challenges, and they've risen above, and they have become the ones who are patient. Give good news to those, because those are the people of heaven. Those are the mu'mineen. When they're tasked with all of these different trials of tribulations, once they've passed all of these tests, once that athlete has passed all of his days of practice and days of sweat that he's put in, وَبَشِّرَ الصَّابِرِينَ. He receives that gold medal. Just like for us as mu'min, we will receive the afterlife. That is the good news that we receive. And the Holy Prophet, he says, one of the verses, he says, حُبُّ الدُّنْيَا رَأْسُ كُلِّ خَطِيئَةٍ. He says, the one who is in love with this world, it's the result of, they will result in causing problems. Excessive love. We all love this world and those people within it. That's not something that we can, of course, say that we don't want to love this world. Love this world, but love the hereafter. Because if there's this excessive love, this is the root and the foundation of every mistake that you make. Once you fall in love with this world, you will result in these mistakes that will fall on you. And we need to make sure that when we're felt with calamities, remind yourself of akhirah. Remind yourself of all of the pain that is to come if you are to do wrong. We have to make sure that we're ready to take on this test. And this is the important for us to understand. When we're discussing these patient ones, that how can I become patient? Well, who are these patient ones? Let's listen to what the Quran says. الَّذِينَ إِذَا أَصَابَتْهُمْ مُصِيبَةٌ. When someone who falls upon them, a calamity falls upon them. What do they say? قَالُوا إِنَّا لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ. They say, certainly we come from Allah, and certainly we will return to Him. This is where this verse of Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un comes from. Many of you have heard of it, but some of you might not know meaning. Inna lillah, I come from Allah, and to Him I will return. When a tragedy falls upon them, these mu'min, these ones who are patient, this is how they respond. I'm from Allah, and from Him I return. Let me realize that this is my hereafter that I need to attain. And only through this hereafter can I truly find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and truly find happiness instead of this finite world. And no one's been tested more than the Ahlul Bayt. When the Ahlul Bayt have been tested by so many trials, what has been their response when they've been receiving these trials? Have you ever heard of the Ahlul Bayt saying, Ya Allah, don't give me more trials. I'm done. I'm finished. I think I want to live an easy life from now on. Well, no, of course we don't mean that. The Ahlul Bayt, they have said, Ya Allah, give me patience to take on this test. Ya Allah, just like that person who is ready to run the marathon. He says, Ya Allah, I have practiced and I've prepared. Please help me when I take on these trials, when I take on these tests, that I am able to succeed as a result of it. And Imam Hussein alayhi salam on Karbala, what he says? He says, there is no way to escape from which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed on you. Allah's pleasure is our pleasure. Radiyallahu radana Ahlul Bayt. And we are patient and we are ready to endure anything Allah plans for us. And Allah gives His reward to the patient. وَبَشِّرْ الصَّابِرِينَ. So let's make sure that we become of the patient, just like Zainab. And to bring back the discussion to Sayyida Zainab salam alayha, to finish off our discussion here. Let's remember Sayyida Zainab in her passing. Because this is of course a way for us to understand that only through her example can we understand how we should respond to trials and tribulations. At a young age, she lost her grandfather. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away when she was only a very young age. She loses her grandfather. Then her mother passes when she passes away from injuries. This is the second loss that Sayyida Zainab sallallahu alaiha, she receives this. What is the third? She sees her father is struck by Ibn Waljam. Amir al-Mu'minin Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam is also struck. She loses her grandfather, she loses her mother, she loses her father. These three important people. If we were to lose someone like that, how would we feel and how would we respond to such a trial? And then her brother Hassan alayhi salam, he becomes poisoned as well in his position. So now she loses her own loved brother as well. So 4 people she has lost in her life. But has she lost her faith in Allah? Has she lost that level of patience? We see no, that's not the result. And then we see the greatest tragedy, the tragedy of Karbala. And in Karbala, she sacrifices Awn and Muhammad, her 2 sons. And these are such a painful tragedy for her. For anyone who loses their own sons, I'm sure if you may know people in the community or so, when you lose your own sons before yourselves, how painful is that? She gives away her sons and she says they are ready to battle. This is someone who has completely detached their heart from this world and attached themselves to the akhirah and realized that this test and trial is meant for me to be able to respond to it. Not for me to falter, not for me to be disconnected from Allah, but for me to even become closer to Him and to be more connected with Him. And she's taken to the palace of Yazid. She comes to Sham, and even then she responds to Yazid. Even then she protects Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. So this is all part of her life and all of the problems that she has. All of these women who are chained and taken from Karbala to Sham. Is these not a tragedy? Not to say that all of your lives or the calamities that fall upon you are not difficult. You've all been felt difficulties, but how are you going to respond to these difficulties? Inna awladakum wa amwalakum fitna. These are all a sort of test for you, and you will end up losing them at some point in your life. But how are you going to respond to these? So we see that. What does Zainab say? What is Zainab? She's content. She is radhi with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed. Do you remember what we said about Imam Hussein on the day of Karbala? He says, Ya Allah, I am content with which you are content. If you are content to give me this trials, I am content to take them on. So this is the views of the Ahlul Bayt that we need to understand. That Sayyida Zainab sallallahu alayha is trying to teach us as an example that it is my way that you should be following. That I've been feeling so many different tragedies. No one has felt a tragedy like Sayyida Zainab. Do you know what her name is? She's very famously known as al-Masa'ib, the mother of sufferings. She's suffered so much to the point where one would think that she has lost her faith in Allah. But what does she say about Karbala? And I want to end off here on this really important note. مَا رَمَيْتُ إِلَّا جَمِيلًا. I did not see anything but beauty. Some ask the question, Ya Zainab, salamu alayha, how is it that you can see beauty in a tragedy? She says, because this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed. And because He's decreed it, I am content with it. That I am fine if this happens. Because I know that I've been so detached. It's a very sad thing. But there's beauty in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decrees. And we need to be able to take on those challenges. So look at our lives. Look at our challenges. Look at our losses in the eyes of Zainab. In the ways of beauty. When you realize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is there. And He is ni'mal wakil. He's the best of the people who can take my affairs. Then I will be ready to take on any challenges. Just like the person who is ready for the Olympics. He starts running, he starts to prepare, and he's ready to take that on. For us, every single moment within our lives, when we receive trials and tribulations, just like Sayyida Zainab sallallahu alayha, we ourselves should also be ready to take it on. And only then can we call ourselves a soldier, a warrior for Sahib al-Zaman. Only then can we be able to truly say that we have accepted which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed on us. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ijman salawat.